Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
So, Mother, or, because it's got it's little m at the beginning of Mother, and it's got an exclamation mark, so it's actually Mother.
Yes. Or a swear word,
Mother.
Yes.
It's not called Motherfucker.
No, but the exclamation point is interesting, isn't it? Because it begins to signify, or at least it has the potential of signifying other things. It's not just a simple declarative statement. It's kind of expressing something.
It's like, oh, Calcutta.
Yeah, a little bit.
Or airplane. Should we start again?
No, I like that.
So, Mother. Mother?
Yes.
Mother?
Well, first of all, I think it's great. I'm not understanding some of the responses. Or in a certain way,
Well, presumably everyone hates it.
Yes. Why would you presume that?
Because it's by Darren Aronofsky, and he has a bit of a history of making good films people hate.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't explain anything that it's doing. It's really it's not like it's too clever for the audience, but it's not trying to help them out.
Right.
And so I think people will just go, "This is pretentious shit."
Yes, okay, that's what they've been saying.
Yeah, well, there you
go. However, I don't think it's pretentious shit. I think it's really good. So first of all, the story. In a way, the story is very simple. Jennifer Lawrence is the protagonist. Everything is seen from her point of view, through her eyes. And actually, I think one of the great thrills for anyone who's interested in acting is to see what she does with it, because she just carries it. She's fantastic. But anyway, the story is short.
Yeah, so give us a rough idea of what happens without going into spoiler territory.
Yes,
because it's easy to spoil this movie plot-wise.
So it's about a young girl married to a distinguished elder writer played by Javier Bardem. And as the film proceeds, she loses control of her home. And, she tries to latch on to her love. And these guests come into the house. And they take more and more and more liberties. And she becomes frustrated that her husband, in a way, is not protecting her right to the house, as if he doesn't feel anything for her, as if other people are more important than her. And so the film also begins to put elements that could be supernatural, but that could also be medicinal. So, she takes this medicine that prevents her from losing her grip on reality.
Well, does it?
Well, that's the question.
The medicine is not explained at all, and it's something that she keeps on taking, and and I don't know that it does have any effect on her grip on reality. Well, for one thing, what is real and what isn't real very quickly becomes a grey area. Yes. You really don't know.
Yes.
So I guess we'll get out of spoiler territory now. You've had the spoiler-free version of the idea of it.
Yes, you could now turn off if you don't want spoilers.
So the version of the film where we get to say whatever we like is the house starts to become overrun with people and torn apart, and time starts to seem to move very quickly. It turns into this kind of vision of hell in some respects. There's this constant repeating motif where she will put her hand on a surface in the house, a wall or a floor, and it will kind of dissolve, and there's a heartbeat.
Yes.
You see this heart becoming slowly more desiccated and dead. But it's not clear at all. Like, it seems very clear early on that this is some sort of vision, something like that, because it's so infrequent. But as the film goes on, these images start to take over, and you have absolutely no idea what is meant to be real and what isn't within the film's world.
It's such a fascinating film.
And her medicine being part of that, I think the only time it changes when she becomes pregnant.
Yes.
She becomes pregnant and she tips it down the toilet, so she doesn't need it anymore for that.
Yes.
And I haven't worked out why.
Well, because it'll affect the baby. So it's
well, you think, but maybe it's done its purpose. Maybe it was to get her pregnant.
Or what happens is that since she stops taking the medication, then all that happens in this filmic world, which becomes more and more and more and more a vision of hell, right, is actually having to do with her. Yeah, it could be internal.
Yeah. Yes.
But I want to talk a little bit about the theme of the film because in a way you see everything through Jennifer Lawrence's eyes, and she's really trod upon. She's this woman who all she wants is her home, and she's building it from scratch, and she's taking care of her every little detail, right? And there's this guy who's her husband who's unappreciative of it, who invites all these strangers over and over again, who treat her with disrespect, take liberties, and destroy her home. And this is cyclical in the film, but becomes worse and more intense until the end, right? So on the one hand, it's about the Jennifer Lawrence character. On the other hand, I think the film, really interestingly, can be read from the point of view of Javier Bardem. Yeah, so you could say that the film is really about him, but seen through her eyes. So here's a guy who's a poet, who's a creative person, who all he cares about is to create, right? And as you learn from the film, he's basically feeding on his previous wife's love. is what actually allows him to create. As this new wife who will give herself totally to him is preparing to give him all her love, so that her love can replace that which has been previously destroyed, which is the previous wife's love. But
this is not just a previous wife, because that's barely mentioned really, because the idea of it being cyclical, at the end of the film she dies and her heart produces this stone, which is this thing that he's had all the way through. Well, he had it at the start of the film, and then a new wife, a different actress, is kind of formed in bed the way that Jennifer Lawrence was right at the start of the film. So this is not exactly a previous wife, but this is a kind of cycle of reincarnation.
Well, you're kind of told it was, because the thing is that you're told that this same house had been lost in a fire, and all that he rescued from it was like this precious stone.
Yeah, it's almost like a glass.
Yeah, and that precious stone is what enables him to be creative.
Yeah.
So then that precious stone is destroyed, and then what the rest of the film is about how actually Jennifer Lawrence's heart will end up becoming a similar stone that replaces the other one, at the same time as Jennifer Lawrence is herself replaced by another woman. So actually, you can assume that at the beginning of the film, what's happened is something very similar to what happens at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the suggestion.
Yes.
The idea this keeps repeating.
That's right. So there's this whole thing about male creativity and control, and how he resents the wife in a way because the nagging, but he doesn't listen to her.
He doesn't listen to her. She
could be anyone.
It's only late on when the baby is born he starts to get annoyed by her. Before then, he barely even seems to notice her.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of quite an interesting indictment of the male creative figure.
Yeah, well, he feeds off her as well. That's the thing.
That's right.
He feeds off her, and she becomes desiccated. And actually, right at the end of the film, when she dies, she shrivels into a husk. It's
right.
Incredible visual. Where she
as he reawakes into a beautiful home with another beautiful wife.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic film. And actually, I think what's fantastic about it is that it's slightly surreal. So
just slightly.
Well, yeah. Well, it's surreal in a different way than Buñuel, which kind of brings up a its own logic or something. Like you don't have a cow on a bed or something. But I suppose you have things that are similar. I guess.
Well, there seems to be allegorical. It seems to be allegorical imagery and storytelling all over the place. There's a lot of, I think, Christian-inflected storytelling. It seems to be all over the place. You've got this idea of this. He turns into this Messiah that people follow and build shrines to, and they want to see the baby. There's this kind of idea that because there's no names.
Yes.
And in the credits, he's just called him,
Really?
like God.
Well,
And so there's this thing that he's a Christ figure to these people who start to follow him because his poetry speaks to them and so on. But then you've also got this idea that he and Jennifer Lawrence are the parents of Christ, who's then born. And you've also got, there's like a Cain and Abel thing with the brother killing the other brother.
Is.
And there's the 10 plagues show up.
Yes.
There's a frog, and there's blood, and there's the guy's ill.
That's fantastic. I hadn't.
But they are all over the place, and they seem to. Like, this is the thing was, I was at one point as well. I was thinking to myself, what Darren Aronofsky does better than almost anyone I can think of is visually convey people losing their minds or kind of who are in an altered mental space. He does it in Pi. It's all about paranoia and claustrophobia, and there's a lot of it in this as well, where he has these telephoto almost shots of people's faces. That's his standard way of shooting people. These long lens close-ups, but it's in a house. The entire film is set inside this house, so it brings the backgrounds very close. So there's this claustrophobia to everything, and even as characters walk around the house and move between rooms, he holds these long lens shots on their faces, so they're trapped constantly within this frame that's moving and shaking, and the backgrounds are moving, and it's really constrictive visually.
Yes, it is.
You really feel this claustrophobia and paranoia and psychosis that Jennifer Lawrence is going through. Everything, she's walking around the house as people are filling it up, ruining it, and she can't escape.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, he's so good at conveying this psychosis visually. I love Russell Crowe, who's not in this, but I was just thinking I love Russell Crowe because I think he's amazing at portraying characters who are on the edge of losing their sanity. I think he's brilliant at that, and I thought, I wish they did a movie together. And then I realised that they did. I forgot.
Very good.
I love Noah.
I don't love Noah.
But Noah is related to this, I think. That Noah is obviously a biblical story, or it's a takeoff of biblical stories. And this, I think, is doing something similar. And I think, actually, they're similar in another way, which is that I think they're both talking about environmentalism.
How interesting. How so?
I think that this film, Mother is talking about environmentalism insofar as the house is taken over and destroyed by people not caring for it,
yes,
and taking over. And actually, I mean, towards the end, it essentially becomes overpopulated.
Yes.
The poem that is what brings everyone to the house isn't read out, but it's conveyed visually as this scene of the burnt-out house with a forest that's similarly burnt out and trees that have been burnt down, and then the love of Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem, they hold hands, and the house sort of springs into life, and all the grass around it is regrown, and everything becomes green and renewed. That's the kind of central image that's what's conveying this supposedly sort of masterwork that Javier Bardem has produced. That is then the vehicle that gets everyone to come to the house and believe in him as a Christ figure.
Yes. I don't know. I'm not sure about as a Christ figure. It's very interesting because, there are figures that come in that definitely have like this demonic cast to them, really. You see it as a kind of a vision of hell.
The first two that come in, Ed Harris and
Michelle Pfeiffer,
his wife, Michelle Pfeiffer, they are skeletal.
They are.
They really are.
Yeah.
Like, Ed Harris is old and craggy, and Michelle Pfeiffer has these lines on her face and these sunken eyes.
She's shot so cruelly.
Yeah, but she they give themselves to the director, don't they?
They do.
And because there are these shots where she's talking to Jennifer Lawrence, and it's intercut back and forth, and Michelle Pfeiffer's face is hollow and sunken and like skeletal.
Yes.
And Jennifer Lawrence's face is just full and glowing
Youth
and
beauty and
they are really opposed.
Yeah,
it's
I know.
really striking.
Yes. They were fantastic as well. I mean, I thought Michelle Pfeiffer was genius, really. You know, kind of, she brought in all of the, like, these different tones of edginess and tauntingness and, you know, kind of barbs and, you know, I thought she was fantastic.
Yeah.
It is interesting how the actors have given themselves over to these parts. Not the least Jennifer Lawrence, who I really think she's astonishing in this, really. She's transparent. You can see everything she's feeling. And she's made to run the gamut of emotion, really, from, like, love to fear to bewilderment to, like, she does everything. And she often does everything in close-up.
You see every movement of the face, every detail.
Yeah, I wasn't so keen as you on the look of the film initially, really, because, you know, it has like this thinness and graininess and so on, and it's kind of so unappealing to consume, right? But afterwards, I thought thematically it made so much sense because, you know, it does convey kind of like, you know, this world on the edge of breakup, really, yeah, kind of so well, I thought. I mean, I think for me, the thing that kind of challenged me as a viewer in a way is not answering the question of why doesn't she just leave, like, earlier, you know? Like,
she is timid, isn't she? And
yes.
she does love him. I was initially I was very unconvinced by their relationship insofar as he's a generation older than she is.
Yes.
And it's nodded to by the movie where Ed Harris says, "Oh, I thought she was your daughter."
Yeah, it's made explicit.
It's made explicit. Yeah. So, and I kind of thought, oh well, is that just like, you know, because I have no idea what was behind the film, whether these were the two actors who they happened to get, or whether this was the idea in the first place to get a male character who was significantly older than his wife. So I don't know.
Well, but thematically it makes sense.
It started to make sense very quickly, and I started to like it because they are opposed in so many ways. She's timid and he's bold, and she's small and light and he's large and dark, and he's comfortable all the time.
Yes.
And she's the opposite.
Yes. She's
not comfortable at all, and it's supposed to be her home.
Yes.
That she's essentially made herself. She's put herself into. She is the home.
She is the home. She's invested everything. The home is her.
Yeah, and she has this weird supernatural personal relationship with the home.
Let's explore this idea. So if the home is her, which I think, you know,
doesn't he say that at the end? Maybe I misheard it because it was hard to tell. I think he said, "I am I and you are home."
Yes,
I think.
Yeah, you must be right, because actually it fits in so well with all of the themes of the film. But I just kind of, you know, want to explore that, because the thing is that if she is the home, you know, then the thing about the blood, you know, and the floorboards that become a wound, and then this safe that she discovers that is a safe space, you know, at the end, but not quite, right? Kind of all of those things, you know, take on a particular kind of resonance if you read them thematically as a thread through this idea that she is the home.
Which safe is that?
You know, when she goes down to the basement,
yeah,
and she discovers that there's some metal behind.
Oh, that's a door, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah. But it's this metal door, and then when it opens, it's like a big safe.
Well, I thought it was a tunnel. I was hoping that she would go through it. I don't know that to say, because there's like a gas tank in there, or propane tank or something.
Yes, well,
I don't know. I didn't read it as a safe. I didn't.
Yeah, I read it as a safe, but anyway, because that's where they end up.
Yeah.
Really, at the end, right?
Well, that's where I was constantly going. This is where the film will end. Like she discovers it halfway through or so.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the film, I'm thinking at some point this madness won't be the end of the film. She has to return to the basement. There's no other reason for that basement to have been introduced.
Yeah.
This is where the film comes to an end. But she descends.
Yes.
You know, there's this thing about there seems to be something happening with the different stories of the house. The basement has fire in it and blood and darkness, and it's where the explosion comes from that ends the film, and that's it. So there's this inferno thing going on, this hell thing, essentially. Without meaning to sound too, you know, like, I mean, because it doesn't. The thing is, you can say, "Oh, well, this represents hell," but like, what does it mean? That's what I'm struggling with the film, is saying there is so much imagery that I recognise and I'm being able to pull out of it, but I'm struggling to add some of it up.
Yes.
A lot of the religious references, which I think are so deliberate,
Yes.
add up to what? You know, is this... He's telling some sort of story of creation.
Yes.
But I'm struggling to fit the pieces together, the details.
Yes. It's a film to see again.
Oh, yeah.
You know? And I you know, I mean, one of the things about films like this, which I think are allegorical, you know, is that it's wonderful to see it on a big screen like today, because I do think that, like, some of the aspects of performance, you know, are so vivid and clear on a large screen. But I think it's worth kind of looking at them again, you know, on at home on video, where you can, you know, fast forward and rewind and see a bit over again, and kind of, you know, and try to make things cohere. Though, what did you think of it as just an experience of, you know,
a cinema experience?
Yeah,
I thought it was fantastic because it's fantastic. I thought it was. I found myself captivated. It moved so much. I didn't know anything about the film. You know that I love knowing nothing about a film before I see it. I don't watch trailers if I can avoid it. I don't read anything. I just go, I want to see this. So I knew nothing. I just knew it was Darren Aronofsky. I didn't even know who was in it. And so the film begins with these two in the house, and they seem to be in love, and the house is kind of in a state of being decorated. And Ed Harris shows up, and I'm thinking, all right, so this is like the cable guy or the gift or something. This is the uninvited stranger thing. And of course, there's a lot of that. But the film develops, and then all of a sudden, it's a lot of uninvited strangers, and then there's a baby, and then there's this the point where Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer's sons show up, and this argument starts. I found quite funny. It's like, I think the film is intended to be humorous at some points, because this argument begins between these four, who are not members of this household, but they've been invited there by Javier Bardem. It's just it's fine for them to be there. He's so open, and like I said to you in the film, Spanish hospitality. It's really too much. But they start arguing. They start arguing about this will, and Ed Harris is dying of cancer, and the one son seems to be cut out from this will, something like this. And so it's this argument which would be fine in, you know, it would make sense in a regular film, make sense in a soap opera. But in the middle of it, you've got Jennifer Lawrence going, "This is my house, and what's going on?" This whole other film just starts happening in the middle of it. And you've got this stuff in the basement that is just it rarely, you know, shows up from time to time, but it's not, it's a constant sort of in the undertow, but it's not in the forefront. And things just move, and then all of a sudden, this horde of people show up who are fans of Javier Bardem. Once this poem has been released that everyone loves, and then the film goes in a completely different direction, and it becomes like a rave seems to start. All of a sudden, parts of this house start showing up that you've never seen before. They seem to put in gates and fences and barbed wire. The police show up on 3 different occasions, like in the same evening. You know, so that's what I mean about time sort of seeming to start to move very quickly. What this is all getting to is, in the moment-to-moment experience of watching it, I was gripped because I did not know what was going to happen. I liked everything that I was seeing because it was bold and unafraid and imaginative and weird, and it's a struggle to say that it all made sense, but kind of within the film's own internal logic, it all seemed to be building something coherent, kind of emotionally. Like I couldn't tell you that, oh, I know what this means, I know why this happened, and I know why, so on. But nothing kind of went, okay, now this is too stupid.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? It's possible, it's really possible, I think, to watch the film and go, this is just dumb.
Well, clearly people have been doing that, but I think they're wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, as you said, the film has a logic, right? And I do think that everything is deliberate and everything, you know, kind of has sense, and, you know, everything is part of the structure of everything else. Now, some of those things aren't quite accessible to me yet, right? But I actually don't think that that's a problem with the film. I mean, I think, that's an invitation to think about it some more and to wonder about kind of what it means and to see it again, right? Because once you watch it, you realize that it's rich in kind of both thematic meaning and also as a kind of like an emotional experience. Really, it takes you places.
Yeah.
And I do think it's very funny. And I think
it is.
If you go with the idea, that some of it is meant to be funny, I think you also kind of enter into it into a slightly different way. Really, I think it's a mistake that the film has been billed as a horror film.
Right. Well, I didn't know that, obviously, because I never know these things.
Yes. Well, I think part of people's bewilderment.
It is to an extent a horror film. It builds on some horror tropes. It's an isolated house in the middle of nowhere with no phone reception. The opening scene is of a woman on her own in this house, walking around. You have no idea what's happening.
With no Wi-Fi, it has phone reception.
It has landline.
It has a landline.
And it has a landline, but your mobile phone won't get any reception.
Right.
They make a point of that because again, that becomes this thing of you're isolated. If you can't get to that phone, there's no one to help you. And of course, later on, someone just takes off the wall.
Yes, as a souvenir.
Yes.
I'll
tell you what, I was getting so triggered, almost like properly, swear to God, by the rudeness. I think as a British person, this film really speaks to me because you've got all these strangers who are just showing up and taking liberties, and I can't have that. And I was getting my heart was pounding. How can you behave this way in someone else's house? But at the same time, Javier Bardem, come on in, help yourself. Like, what are you doing? I think this film is a horror film in Britain.
I was horrified by it as well, I must say, because, there's one thing about, Javier Bardem's attitude, which he's basically saying, make yourself at home, treat this as if it's your home. Yeah. But actually, people were not treating it as if it was their own home. No. People were treating it as like if it was a trash trailer. Yeah. They were going to throw off a cliff in 2 minutes.
But then what that really comes down to in the end is it comes down to his ego. He wants to be loved. They say as much as this in the dialogue. This is not reading anything into it. He loves to be loved. She's constantly asking him to tell all these people to go home because they'll listen to him. They're there for him, so they'll listen to him. And it's not I can't make them go home. It's I want them to stay.
He not only loves to be loved, he's absolutely dependent on it. Right? That's the whole thing about that rock, which is a heart, which is the love that which is what enables him to kind of live and create and move forward, is actually
it's her love.
It's her love.
I mean, and again, they say as much in the film. This is not reading anything into it. When Jennifer Lawrence dies, he says to her, "She's burnt from this explosion," and he says, "Your love is still there, isn't it? Something like that. You still love me." And she goes, "Yes." And she goes, "Take it." And he reaches in and takes this from her chest.
From her
heart breaks apart and reveals this. So it is literally her crystallized love is his inspiration. It's. I mean, some of it, I suppose that sounds really overt. Some of it is really overt. Like in that respect, it's a film about men leeching off women and using them. And it's because this sort of stone that he's left with has pride of place on his mantelpiece, and it's used as inspiration. It's like, but you've destroyed a woman for this. Exactly. You've ended a life for this.
I think that's a good note to end on, actually, because it brings us back to this point that like Jennifer Lawrence is the protagonist, right? But the theme of it is really, in a way, about what men do to women, which is kind of, they use them up, they suck them dry, right? And kind of basically just use them as a motor, not only for existence, right, but for development and kind of, to have a life.
Yeah.
Right.
And if my interpretation of it as an environmental parable is of any use, then it's saying exactly the same thing about Mother Nature.
Well, I think
Mother Nature is destroyed and taken and used for our own pleasure by people,
man.
By man.
Yeah.
By man, of course, which is another word for humanity. Man. It cost $30 million, and in 3 days, 2-3 days, it's made $3 million.
It's headed for disaster. So
that's a shame.
Yeah, it's too bad. I mean, there is something interesting to talk about at another point. You know, there are these absolutely great films. There are films at the moment that kind of function in the way that, you know, art cinema was set to function in the 60s, right? That the idea is that you come out of the theater and you want to have a conversation about it, right? What is it about? What does it mean? Kind of, you know, it's just so interesting. What does it say about people, about the way, our world, the way we live? Like, you know, these films are kind of, are here at the moment, and yet nobody's interested in watching them, right? I think the problem with Mother is in many ways the similar problem with Detroit. You know, kind of truly great films, kind of done by brilliant people about kind of, you know, the great questions of the day, and nobody is interested. I think it's kind of a very interesting thing to speculate about, and maybe we should do a chat about just that at some point.
But that's too intimidating for me. I only know about cameras, movements, and long lenses.
All right, let's leave it here.